Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This is our 230th episode, and as we do every 10th episode, this is an audience-supplied Q&A session where we do our best to answer as many queries as possible throughout the duration of the show. Today, I will be doing the asking, and Brian Miner and Alberto Nunez will be doing the answering. Some of these questions came from our case study Q&A form, which you can always find at 3dmusclejourney.com/QA. And others came from unanswered questions that we simply didn't have time to cover in a couple of our latest YouTube live AMA streams. So if you don't already follow us on YouTube, make sure to do so because our coaches do their absolute best to prioritize those questions during live calls. And then I do my best by picking some extra questions from those calls here to answer on these Q&A pods. So it's a great spot to get your submissions to end up in front of the coach's eyes and ears via a couple different routes. So, okay. Topics covered in this episode will include how much time to spend in the gym per workout, how to increase appetite or hunger levels, whether or not it's okay to train when you don't feel recovered from the previous workout, how you should manipulate nutrition during a deload phase when cutting or gaining, whether you should increase weight by the smallest or largest increments possible, how long it's possible to build muscle on maintenance calories, if heavy leg days leave you fatigued, should you split them into 2 sessions, whether or not there's a benefit to mini bulk and mini cut cycles year-round instead of hanging out at maintenance year-round, how to increase your grip strength for deadlifts, and finally, what the guys have learned or changed their mind about in the fitness industry over the last 6 months. So, as always, if you have any feedback or comments on this episode, let us know over on our YouTube at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 230. Let's get into it. Here is Q&A session 23 with Alberto Nunez and Brian Miner. Question number 1. Is 2 hours too long in the gym when using auto-regulatory rest between sets and eccentric tempo? ? Brian, go.
I would say no. I think the question is maybe in a roundabout way trying to ask what is too long in the gym and why? And I think a lot of that has to do probably with rest intervals. It's like if you're doing a bunch of short rest and getting a lot of residual fatigue between sets, then I think you're really going to start to see the effects of each additional set start to have less and less of an impact. But I mean, I think 2 hours, if for example, like a power lifter who's doing multiple compound lifts, that's probably a quick session for somebody like that. And so, no, I think it's reasonable. I think if you're spending more than 2.5, 3 hours in the gym, even as a power lifter, you're probably wasting some time. And there's plenty of lifters that are doing that. I think for most bodybuilding work, sub 2 hours is probably the goal. But I think that there's not an arbitrary cutoff. It's all relative kind of to what you're doing.
Yeah. Anything to add, Bert?
Yeah, it's definitely not the eccentrics. I think that's what he included that in there. Is me being conscious of my eccentrics, adding to how much time I spent there. It couldn't be unless I can't see that happening in any practical way.
2 minutes tops.
Yeah, total.
But, when designing programs, I think that is... right now I'm training 3 days a week, and because I'm training 3 days a week, I am there a little bit longer than I would be if I was training 4 or 5. So that's sometimes something that you can consider as if that is just getting in the way of the other things you have to do. It's okay, if you have room, it's you can add days. That's always an option. Because again, when you build splits, it's okay, this is the work I feel like I have to do, per body part, if we're speaking about bodybuilding. And then you just kind of split that up in a way that makes sense, where you think it creates the least amount of overlap and, each day stays at a relatively high quality. So you can play around with that. And there's also other hacks that you can like mess around with, like drop sets. You can perform myo reps, things like that. But I think 2 hours is, I think what most people who are pretty serious about their training, they end up averaging somewhere around like 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Yeah. And especially like with powerlifters, or depending on what you're getting up to, like warm-up sets can get a little crazy depending on right, like how strong you are and what you have to get to.
And that's so different because
to get to a top single
it's,
takes like so long.
and to be there, it's like powerlifting, a lot of it's like it's study time. Like it's not just getting through what is on your list of things to do. It's like you're there to fix things, to be mindful of the way you move, to find better ways of moving as you're performing other work you need to do. And so powerlifting is one of those things where it's like, yeah, if you know what, today's one of those days where you might need, I don't know, 8 minutes in between your sets to keep quality really high. That's just what it takes. That's the catch with powerlifting. Like 2 hours to most powerlifters, like Brian said, they'd be like, whoa, is this like an intro block or something?
Yeah.
So for this particular asker, if we were to say like, what would be the markers of it being too long? If y'all said there's not an actual time set, what would be a couple things to look out for to know that it is hitting the too long for you mark?
I would say if your frequency, because Berto brought up a good point with the frequency, like if your frequency is more than, say, 4 days a week, 4 or more, I don't really see a reason why 2 hours, you should be going over 2 hours. You know, if you're on a 3-day split, maybe. But oftentimes the people that are on 3-day splits are kind of doing that out of necessity because of time constraints anyway. And they're okay with doing a little bit less volume. You know, it's like very few people. It's like, I can only train 3 days a week, but I can train 4 hours at a time.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is like, if you're resting an adequate amount of time between sets, like the sessions are going to add up in terms of time. So that's why I said, like, I think a lot of it's relative to the amount of sets you're doing. Like if you're doing short rest intervals, you know, like sub 3 minutes on compounds, which is what I would consider like a shorter rest interval. I think if you're taking 2 hours in the gym like that, you're probably doing like a lot more volume than you probably want or need in that case.
Yeah. And it'll just show in your quality of work.
Yeah.
Per day, if not over time.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's too much if you're starting to lose quality in the session, or if it's getting in the way of the other things like you want to do. I think those are the two main factors I would look at.
Cool. All right. 1 is done. Question 2. What would you say is the best to increase appetite? I fell out of love with the gym and I lost a good 7 to 10 kg of body weight. I'm back into it now, but I just can't eat enough or feel like I can. Any advice?
I mean, I think appetite's going to be hard to increase for some people. I think it's probably easier to decrease your appetite than it is to increase, I think, for a lot of people. I think the best tool, I think, would be to use more calorically dense sources, like, or even liquid calories at times. Something that you can just put away quite a bit of calories without much space in your stomach. But I mean, I don't know. I've never had this problem.
So like, it's not about increasing your appetite. It's knowing you don't have a huge appetite, but knowing you need to get enough calories.
I think that's probably a better way to think of it.
And that's Berto's life. So
yeah.
As he drinks his calories while you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
Tell him, Bert, what do you do? What do you have to eat?
When it comes to food
calories?
selection, I think it's going to have to be kind of the opposite of what you would do when you are dieting, where like you're playing the volumetrics game a little bit more. So, hey, you want to make the base of your foods for health reasons, things that are good for you, right? And, you know, you might be like somewhere around the bare minimum requirements. And then the other stuff is going to be foods that a dieter would avoid because like they're triggering, they're tasty, you want more of, they don't fill you up. So you play that game in reverse. Another thing you can kind of play off is one of the perks of flexible dieting is that, hey, you give people these boundaries, these constraints. Like, this is your caloric range. They're dieting. And it's like, you kind of make it work in a way that is most efficient for you, that, among other things, makes you suffer the least. And sometimes we play around with like meal timing. Like, maybe they're not hungry in the morning, so they have very light feedings there. It's kind of the same game where look at when you're the hungriest and try to capitalize on that. But you know what? Even a step ahead of that would be, and Brian's been here because I've been here, and you might have been here in your own way too, Andrea, where we were eating an immense amount of meals at some point, like 6, 7, whatever it was.
Every
And
3 hours.
You can train your body to ask for food, like in those intervals, like whatever. Even people who don't watch their intake, like they usually have these feeding patterns, and they're hungry right around those times. So usually, if you tough it out for like a good month or so, eventually your body gets very used to, like, it's like, okay, I eat at 8 in the morning, and then there's a mini meal at 11, and eventually it starts to ask you for that. Like, I've been at some pretty gross weights, but I was eating in like these regular frequencies, and I felt like I was dying if I didn't get something to eat. So yeah, rough it a little bit. It's going to be hard at first, but eventually you can get it to the point where that's just what your body's used to.
Yeah. Well, it's like people that have 9 to 5s or go to school or whatever. It's like, like, if I don't eat now, I won't eat for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I have to eat now because, and like you said, even if you have a more flexible schedule, you can create that type of thing for yourself. Set your alarms. And what are you drinking, Bert, right now?
Drink soda.
Yeah, drink soda. That's his fancy one.
And ginger soda.
Ginger. Of all the things.
I think too, like, if you might be an individual that would benefit from just more dietary fat in relation to carbs. Adding, oils, olive oil, avocado oil, whatever, adding nuts. I mean, things like that are like an easy way to put down calories very quickly without having, a required appetite to do so.
Yeah. Or like sauces, like you said, liquid calories, not just with drinks, but like dip some shit in some ranch. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so it's hard to increase appetite, but it's easier to manipulate your food volumes knowing your appetite isn't going to be there.
I would say that's a fair statement.
And you can train yourself to eat in any certain way. Like, I've been over 220, over 230, and I swear to you, I was hungry, like if I was missing a meal,
Yeah.
So.
Just like the most delicious shit you can find. In addition to good things. But like, I think when we care so much, at least a lot of people, when they think like, I'm getting into physique sports, so I don't eat yummy things anymore. And it's like, now if you're trying to get big, you kind of need something, right? Because a lot of people think they're hard gainers turn themselves into high volume eaters, unfortunately, which is the opposite of what would help them gain.
Or they're trying to eat like the stereotypical bodybuilding menu, and it's like there's utility in calorically dense sources, especially in this situation, I think.
Okay.
So ranch is what we're saying.
So
number 2. The answer to number 2 is ranch.
Yeah. What is it? Yeah, in America anyways. I don't know what that is everywhere. In the UK, I just found out that they put mayonnaise in their fries. Just found that out.
Oh, that's
right,
troubling.
That's gross.
Yeah, but
that's gross.
It's ketchup if you're in the US, just saying. Listeners.
I can taste mayonnaise in my mouth.
Or it's like like mayonnaise-based sauces. Okay.
Yeah. No,
anyways.
Even ranch is gross. Yeah.
It is.
What?
Ranch is disgusting.
Is so good.
It's the most overrated condiment, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm upset. What do you put on your chicken fingers or your fries, if not ranch? No, I need to know.
What do you put on your tendies, Bert?
Yeah. Is it barbecue? That's my second favorite.
I like hot sauce. Anything spicy.
Barbecue's
Bert's
good.
not American. He's really almost from Mexico.
Buffalo. We'll call it buffalo.
Buffalo.
There we go. Yeah.
hot wing sauce.
What about you, Brian? What did you say?
I was just to say barbecue's
Barbecue's a good
pretty
one.
legit.
Not as many calories as the ranch, but it's also good. It can be real sugary.
It is very sugary.
Okay. All right. We did it. Number 3. There are times when I complete is the word, not compete. All right. There are times when I complete my 5 days of training, take 2 days off, and then when I'm ready to start back on day 1, I still feel sore. Nothing terrible, but definitely not fully recovered. So the question is, from a hypertrophy perspective, would it be best to push ahead and train or take another rest day? Maybe pushing ahead to increase work capacity over time, ? Or maybe waiting leads to better performance / stimulus ? What do y'all think? And if I'm not mistaken, this particular question was from a case study Q&A, and they even said they were one of Bert's clients at some point. I don't think you know who it
so
is.
it's my fault.
I should have written that. It's not your fault.
It's your fault, Bert.
It's not your fault.
100% your fault.
Maybe y'all had this talk. I don't know. But he was like,
hire a new coach because that guy ain't doing it.
Forgot to mention, this one's yours.
No, but I don't know if it, like he said, I've worked with Bert before. So I don't know if like maybe y'all had a Skype 5 years ago, or maybe he's on your roster now. Who knows? It's a mystery. Maybe he takes your whatever program on Boost Camp. That could be another. So 5 and 2, not recovered by the end of 2.
Well, I think the first thing that kind of needs to be defined and qualified is like what recovery means. Like,
Great
there's
point.
a lot of different elements of recovery, and with hypertrophy, like not all of them need to be fully intact for you to move the needle in that direction. Like muscle soreness, like you could have muscle soreness, but still be in a great position to train and have it be a productive session. Like if it's debilitating muscle soreness, then yeah, and it's like, okay, this is clearly going to impact like either my mobility or my quality of work, then might be worth pushing. But he said nothing terrible, or she said nothing terrible. So I think it's probably fine. And the other thing too is if you're like consistently sore every single week, maybe that would be something to consider, like reducing volume a bit. But it's not uncommon. Like for me personally, like I'll be sore the first like 1 to 2 weeks after starting a new block, like mildly sore, and then after a while, like once you get adjusted to it, it's that soreness. What may feel like excessive volume is now just because of the repeated bout effect. Like it's much more manageable in that regard. So yeah, I think I would need more context. Like if performance is clearly suffering, like, okay, I'm going in on Monday or whenever day 1 is, and like I'm having a hard time routinely matching or exceeding, previous numbers, then that's sort of like in what people sort of often define recovery as, like in the sports science realm, is like recovery of baseline performance. And you can do that and still feel pretty wrecked in many cases. So, and if you are able to match your previous performance, it's like that tells us that, okay, this could be soreness that's unrelated to, like, it's not of concern in terms of getting a productive stimulus.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that it matters if it's like every week forever, or if it's like at certain points in the mesocycle.
I think it's more, if you're going to feel sore, I think it's more common to feel like muscular soreness earlier in a block than later. It's not to say like it's a red flag if you experience it later in a block, right. But for most people, it seems that, you adapt to that level of volume and that workload.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is like joint discomfort might progressively increase for people while muscular soreness goes down. And that's one thing, like, that can become a bottleneck very quickly for people. And so if that's like routinely you feel, okay, my knees, hips, elbows, whatever, feel wrecked going into day 1, then it would probably be worth examining your program in figuring out a way to remedy that, whether it's different exercise selection, different adding additional rest days, reductions in volume, etc.
Yeah.
So assuming, let's just say, this athlete, my athlete, right, comes back and they're like, okay, I was pretty tore up most of the time by the time I started most weeks. I think where I started investigating is like, all right, so what does your outside the gym stuff look like? Right. So nutritionally, are you doing what we wanted you to do, what you intended to do? From a sleep standpoint, I think that's huge. Same thing when it comes to stress. So sometimes you can do all those things and they just enhance your ability to absorb whatever your training is throwing at you. So,
yeah,
because quite often I think we've all been there where we have to create these programs that really only push for so much adaptation because of certain things that are going on in the person's life. So I start there because quite often things like this, first place people go to is like, there's something wrong with my training. And it's like, well, let's look at the stuff outside the gym and let's not forget that. Also, usually on average, most people, I get their training like 5-6 days a week, which, by the way, if you're training 5-6 days a week, you're a pretty motivated person. That is one thing I would look at when it comes to recovery. It's like, are your levels of motivation like floating like right around what they usually are? Because when I push too hard, that is the one thing. It's like I don't feel like training, which is really weird for me. But they come to me with 5-6 days of training, and what I try to do over time is like cut the fat, like the stuff that really isn't helping us. Just like, years ago, we would do that with like 7-8 meals that people were eating. It's like, you're kind of wasting jewels here, right? So same thing with the training. It's like, I'll try to condense their work to the stuff that I think is really contributing here. And then you do that, but then especially if they're being coached well, they start to get better at like their movements, at their technique. And on a set per set basis, they're able to generate so much more stimulus. So sometimes that does happen, that as you become more advanced, if anything, you just need less total work. Like you can see this with like really, really strong powerlifters, the amount of volume they do compared to someone who is of similar body weight, but not as strong. Like usually if you were to swap out like the maxes and put it into like the advanced guys like program, it would look like a pretty like not so exciting, thrilling program. So yeah, sometimes what ends up happening is my lifters outgrow like the 5-6 days a week because they're just so much more efficient and we're getting really good at the things that are producing results. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of my athletes and he comes back and I'm like, dude, we might have to trim a lot of things from like that day 5 or make it a lot smaller than it already is. So yeah, he might only need 4 days. Also worth looking around and seeing what you could do maybe a little bit better on the part that I think is the hardest part, the outside the gym habits, because we all fall in love with training initially, and initially it doesn't require a whole lot of thinking outside the gym, but eventually that becomes more and more important as we become more advanced.
Yeah. It's funny too that because the type of athlete that signs up for coaching, like you said, is usually highly motivated. Like they want to, I know I did when I came on with you. I'm like, I want to train every day, of course. Like, please let me. So it's like as you get more advanced, you learn, not just that like you need less, but like you learn to be okay doing less without being scared you're going to lose opportunities or whatever. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Hey everyone, this is Andrea Valdez popping in real quick to tell you all about our latest course in the 3DMJ Vault titled Personalizing Your Program. This course was made by our Chief Science Officer, Eric Helms, and it's honestly the entire foundation of how to assess, create, and manage training programs for bodybuilders, powerlifters, and serious lifters of all types. Eric will spend the first few chapters teaching you about the 3 pillars of training adherence and how not considering any one of them will lead to decreased performance or results. In the last half of the course, we'll give you insights and advice on how to manage your program through life stressors while participating in other types of non-lifting activity, what to do when you miss a workout as an off-season athlete, how to handle missed workouts as a competitor with a deadline, and how to conceptualize goal management and injuries. The course is full of the advice that nobody really wants to hear until they've run into problems, can't stick to their training schedule, have ruined relationships, or fallen short of the plans that they had for themselves. It's the backbone of every athletic career, and it's what we wish athletes knew before ever lifting their first weight. But since most people skip these steps or lessons, it's where most setbacks in progress or confidence can happen. We know this course will serve as a solid foundation or a solid set of reminders for lifters of all levels, and we can't wait for you guys to take it. Personalizing your program is now the 19th course in the 3DMJ Vault, which is our online learning platform of organized video-based education for serious lifters. You can become a VIP member to access every single one of our courses for just $16.99 per month or $79.99 per year. This means that once you complete this foundational course, you'll have access to everything else you'll need to build your own training program with these lessons in mind. You'll have access to our Quick Start PDF guide, along with the entire 40-plus videos in the lifting library, so you can select the right exercises to fit your newly built training plan. VIP members will also get access to our suite of nutrition setup courses as well, such as the Calculating Your Calories course, the Calculating Your Macros course, the Sustainable Fat Loss course, and many more. Go to 3dmjvault.com and sign yourself up today. That's 3dmjvault.com to get all access. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show. Next question, number 4. Out of 10, we have 10 on this one. How should nutrition look during a deload while you're in a cut and in a bulk? Should you go to maintenance or just keep your calories the same? So deload, calories for both cutting and gaining.
I mean, I think there's the goal of the deload is to promote recovery, both physically and mentally. So increasing in a cut, like increasing calories is only going to benefit that. But you also have to consider like the timeline somebody's on, in a prep or in their program as a whole, and how frequently they're deloading. Like if they're deloading like every 8 weeks in a cut and you have an ample timeline and you don't feel like you need to keep the foot on the gas during that week, then yeah, I think that's sort of a nice timeline for, adding a week of maintenance calories or, potentially like a small surplus. But if you're, on like a deloading every 4th week and you want to be, you're 12 weeks out from a show and you've got, 15 pounds to lose, then it's like, okay, maybe this isn't the best use of, like we have to weigh is the juice worth the squeeze in terms of like the grander outcome that we're after.
Yeah.
As far as like a surplus, I mean, I usually don't manipulate calories on deloads in a surplus. Just because I think, I think people overestimate how many calories they burn. Like, let's say we cut someone's volume in half in resistance training. Like, that's not an exorbitant amount of additional expenditure that we're needing to, like, pull back on, to avoid the surplus becoming, like, grossly excessive. So,
yeah,
I think it's, personally, I think there's really only, there's no downside of just keeping it the same in a surplus, but in a deload, I think there's just more context that needs to be considered in terms of the block length and the proximity to the goal for fat loss.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, yeah, I've done it on preps, for example, where we have a deload week and it's like, hey, we're not going to be training very hard this week, so let's go kind of hard and like make some progress. Obviously, that's not going to
You mean
be
nutritionally like a big cut?
Let's
stay low.
Cut the calories. Yeah. But again, like there's a cost of doing that, right? It's like we don't get the benefits of the deload, right? Or not all the way. So the cut, like Brian said, it's like there's so many more options there. Sometimes I do like to time the diet break so that it falls on a deload week. Traditionally, if you do this, because it makes sense on paper, but people end up feeling a little worse, right? And I think a lot of that is just your body finally telling you the way it's been feeling, like all those weeks, right? It's kind of like when you start tapering someone's calories up, or even on isolated refeed days, they get a little bit more food and your body's fighting like, okay, this is about how hungry we are. So sometimes when you do that, when you strategize this like fluffy pillow of a week, both dietarily and from a training standpoint, sometimes it feels worse. But again, that doesn't mean, it doesn't make sense, right? It wouldn't be working, that it's making the situation worse. It's just that finally your body got a chance to like chill out, and it's telling you what's up. But that's one way of doing it. I think that the diet break and the cut and the training deload, I think those sink in pretty well together. And I think, as you start your cut, probably not a bad way of organizing yourself. On the gaining phase, like Brian said, I'd rather just keep things the same. As a matter of fact, I know this is true for myself when I am not training, because I am less achy, less tight. I find myself like moving more. Like I get up off the couch to get the remote, things like that. So yeah, it ends up being a wash. I don't know. Take advantage of the deload week, and maybe if you're concerned about it, just get some active recovery. Go do some chores at home, like the stuff you've been putting off. Go empty out the shed, things like that. But yeah. There's just almost no wrong answer to this. I think you can justify it and play around with many different angles here, which kind of tells you that at the end, it's really not that big of a deal. Like even if you miss with this one, hardly matters.
Yeah. When y'all have an athlete that you're like, say it's a first time Skype and our goal is to gain for the next 6 to 10 months or some shit, how do you prescribe like calories? Is it, because he's asking about how calories would move, like do you do weekly averages, daily averages or something like that, plus or minus 500 calories, or like how tight of a prescription, how big of a window do y'all usually do with a first time Skype call athlete? I'll see you in 6 weeks and you're gonna gain for the next 6 months or some shit.
I mean, I think there's quite a bit of variability there too.
There is. Okay. There's not like I typically
I mean,
like
I'd
to
say
do
like
this
on
for off-season.
average, I mean, I can't remember. It's been years since I've like given people prescribed like hard macros. Like these are your 3 numbers.
Right.
Like I need
for
you to
off
hit
season,
these.
we pretty much never do that.
Even
because,
honestly,
like,
even with prep, to be honest, like the parameters may tighten a bit. Like I might, for example, like an off-season athlete, I might give them a caloric range like plus or minus 100 to 200 calories. Usually it's probably like 100-ish. And then I might give them like a fat minimum, and then a protein range, but kind of let them exchange the fats and carbs.
Right.
Just based on preference, flexibility. But I do think as you get leaner and, some extra carbs, like when you're depleted, can go a long way.
Right.
And so kind of tightening the parameters a little bit, giving them maybe late in prep or later in prep, okay, here's kind of the carb. I don't want you to really go below this in terms of carbs for the sake of added fat. And usually that's not like that's, people sort of naturally gravitate towards that, I think, a bit anyway, because they're just higher. Like it's putting away fat that's just calorically dense, and so if you're
not like,
calorically
wow, I feel
restrict,
so great.
yeah, like I added a tablespoon of olive oil to my, so yeah, that's I think that naturally sort of occurs anyway, but yeah, I think there's quite a bit more flexibility, I think, than people realize. Right.
And I think
our expenditure varies day to day. And so it's ignorant to think like, okay, these numbers are this is the magical path to my success. It's like, just get yourself aimed in the right direction and be consistent.
Yeah. And I think it's just helpful to know how loose y'all's off-season recommendations are. So when someone is thinking like, what should I do in the off-season with my calories? It's like, it's already such a big window of what will work that whether you decide to drop them or increase or keep, it's not going to really do much.
Really briefly on that, Andrea.
Go for it.
I still will give people macros, but it's only so they take that course and like understanding that, hey,
Yeah.
I don't know, so-and-so coach that exchanges cream of rice and oatmeal, like it doesn't make sense, right? So it takes them beyond the first layer of calories. It's like, okay, these are carbs, these are fats, and quite often they're, you can't have one without the other. So it's an important, course to take. But then eventually, once they can be pretty proficient with that, like I don't want to make them like overly neurotic where I'm getting check-ins where it's like, coach, like 3 grams over on my fats on average this week. Like I don't want that either. But
I've given Berto that check-in, that exact check-in about a decade ago. I just want y'all to know. I
probably was upset at the time because I think that's how things were, right? But yeah, they do that, and then eventually what ends up happening is like we go to calories with ranges, and obviously if I'm doing the macro thing with someone, the calories with ranges, if they are, obviously they have to be a little bit newer, or often they are, the caloric ranges will be a little bit more broad.
Mm-hmm.
And since they could do the macro thing, like this will be relatively like low stress. And what ends up happening is that if anything, as time goes on, those ranges like increase more so, and I let them pick their spots. So for example, if they're gaining and I don't know, they went on this long hike during the weekend, okay, it's going to be a different day from an expenditure standpoint. It's like you can play to the higher end of that range. Or if they're dieting and it's like, hey, today I'm not really hungry and recovery is good, I feel amazing, let me dig a little bit more. So just how I think Gen 1 flexible dieting, what made it unique is it presented bodybuilders with a level of autonomy that just wasn't seen before, but it was overly restrictive in its own way. But the beauty in that was like, hey, you decide how many meals, you decide what foods. And when it comes to caloric ranges, generally speaking, people aren't going to do like dumb things like 10% of their calories come from fat or 50%. They're going to be in a range that makes sense for the sort of physical activity they perform. But broadening up those ranges and having them be a little bit more in tune with their body, it's no different than going to the gym and it's like, okay, I have a 3x3 with 400 on the deadlift schedule today, but I think I'll snap my stuff up if I do that. I'll bring it down to like 375 for the day. So it's kind of the same thing, and it's just beneficial to be able to teach your athletes to fend for themselves and make those dynamic decisions. And that to me is truly what flexible dieting is.
Yeah.
I think
speech.
When he mentioned he still does use like macros at times, I think there's situations like I have people where I will give them ranges, but they're a little bit hesitant to go that route because they've been doing, these counting macros to the gram for a long time. So sometimes I'll give like example macros, which is like, it's like, okay, well, these are your ranges. Here's some numbers that meet these requirements. And I think that helps. And then one thing, Bert, this was a few years ago, probably longer than that, but I remember I had an athlete I was working with and I had given them some ranges. And it was kind of evident that they were sort of abusing the flexibility to some degree. And you had brought up a good point. I've used this a couple times. You're like, have you considered just giving them hard numbers for a bit? Like that light bulb goes off in their head like, shit, like I need to be this diligent, And so you have to kind of pick your spots when you go that route because you don't want to like promote what we're trying to like avoid in terms of neuroticism. But there's some people who it's like they're under-reporting and they don't realize it. And then once you give them firmer parameters, I think that definitely helps. And like he said, like there is value in learning to track and like knowing how to get those, reach a targeted outcome in terms of, calories and macronutrients. But again, I'd say for the most part, I can't remember like the last time I've like felt like I had to do that based off like the outcome itself.
Right. It would just be to create the habits that you're looking for.
It's more behaviorally driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we went over that today. Yeah. Calories for, it sounds like y'all do all kinds of shit in prep based on, like there's no, like there are some athletes, some situations where you'll increase or decrease calories in accordance to a deload or not, depending on how they're feeling, how far the show is, how their fat loss is, if they have time. Like there's like no way to answer this for cutting.
Yeah.
Distinctly. Okay. All of the above. We do all of it. Okay. Number 5. Should one add load via the smallest weight increment possible or the biggest when the goal is size? Should I use like a 0.5 pound jump or a 1 pound jump or more if I have both options? I think to make that bigger, like a 3 pound versus a 10 pound or something. I guess it depends on the movement, and I'm going to shut up and let y'all talk about it.
Well, go ahead, Bert, because I could go down kind of a rabbit hole on this.
Yeah, whatever I leave out, I'm sure you'll clean up. Yeah, like Andrea said, like it depends on the movement, right? If you have the luxury of maybe on something like a dumbbell curl, dumbbell lateral raise of going up in such small increments, hey, why not? Makes sense. So yeah, small increments like that probably are better left off for those sort of movements. Can't see many situations where people would have access to that outside of like home gyms or something where they can where they have adjustable dumbbells. I think the load increment should be typically the way I would recommend it is something that keeps you in the rep range that we assign to that movement, but it doesn't really jeopardize form. Like I don't buy the whole, it's a new load, so my technique's a little bit off and I'm just gonna have to grow into it these next few weeks. Because it's like you do that, there's a very good chance that the load you were using before is probably providing more stimulus. You probably jumped by too much. So I like my load increments to be something that keep you in that rep range, that you just kind of have to perform the exercise as you were. It's netting you a little bit more stimulus, but by like a smidge, like not crazy amounts here. Like, and yeah, I think one of my favorite parts about load increments, because there's many ways to progress. You can do things like, hey, the RPE is gradually coming down. Small things with technique that you should not be able to see, but the lifter can report, where, I don't know, like for example, on my dumbbell presses, my left arm does this jerk thing. And to me, it's like progress if I'm working on some dumbbells. If I'm like, oh, I didn't even feel the derp coming, You can't see it, but I can feel it, right? And to me, when I increase the load, it's almost like the most convenient, laziest way to step up the level of stimulus that I'm experiencing, where I don't, again, like when I'm munching on a load, trying to make it better via RPE, like small things from a technical standpoint, like I have to be extra mindful of what's going on. But when I increase the load, it's like, okay, well, just keep working as you were, technique and nothing else to change. And you're, exposing your body to a little bit more stimulus. So I guess in general, yeah, it should just be, my short answer would be, after saying all that, a load that keeps you in the rep range that you assign to that movement. And it shouldn't be so heavy that like you have to grow into this new technique. Because if that's the case, there's a good chance that what you were doing before is probably providing better stimulus.
Yeah, I think that last part's especially important. It's like the power lifter, it's like depth will be there on meet day. Like I know that I'm not strong enough to do this to depth yet, but it'll be there on meet day.
No.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think some of it's related to I think a big part of it's kind of related to the goal too. Like if somebody has strength, is a primary objective, then sort of biasing like load progression maybe a little bit more frequently than like rep progression with the same load is going to have some advantages there. For hypertrophy though, like my short answer would be it doesn't really matter as long as your sets are taken to a similar level of adequate effort. But in a practical sense, like what you said, Bert, like the rep range is gonna, in the movement itself, is gonna dictate that. And I think Eric and I talked about this maybe on that rep range podcast. I can't remember, but I mean, there's movements like, let's say I program like a lateral raise for like 12 to 15 reps with the goal of like, okay, once we get to the top end of the rep range, like double progression will increase load and then kind of work our way back up. Well, like the strength of the individual is going to kind of impact that rep range too, because for somebody who's, you know, a novice who might be doing, you know, 10 pounds on each side, you know, 10-pound dumbbells, it's like increasing by, you know, most commercial gyms are going to increase by 5 pounds a dumbbell. It's like that's a 50% increase in load. And now, like, it's unrealistic to assume you're going to be able to stay within that rep range. So, and at the same time, that movement's sort of generally programmed in more moderate to higher rep ranges. Like, most people aren't doing like lateral raises for sets of 5, you know? So in that sense, I think if you feel like you're forced to have an assertive load increases that's going to put you sort of below what you feel comfortable with in terms of reps for a movement, then just extend the ceiling of the rep range. So it might become like 12 to 20 reps. And then, you know, take whatever load increase you have accessible. Obviously, if you have like those micro loading abilities at your gym, then you might be able to stay within a tighter rep range since it's a smaller relative increase. So it's just the mathematic nature of heavier versus lighter loads and the strength of the individual. But, you know, I've found like for a lot of bodybuilders, especially that have been training a while, that have like some joint discomfort here and there, I tend to, not always, but I often find I gravitate more towards, okay, let's build up a nice runway of reps here before we increase load, just because like we're not compromising the stimulus in doing so. Like we know that, but I think it provides probably a more graded exposure to like increased demands at the connective tissue level. Like if you're increasing loads on a less frequent basis, like there will come a point where it's like, okay, now it's impractical. Like we don't want to do sets of 15 on squats, you know, or something like that. So at that point, yeah, increasing load is good, but then maybe it's a pretty modest increase, you know, and just making sure like frequent load increases, I think, work pretty well for like novice to intermediates. And then once you kind of get to that advanced level, it's like those rep progressions are going to be more frequently occurring in terms of like the degree of adaptation that's required to achieve it. So, so yeah, I think I agree with everything he said, but I also think that it's, you know, just playing with the rep ranges. Like if you find increasing is going to put you out of that range, then just extend the range, especially if the goal is hypertrophy.
I think y'all nailed it. And there's also like almost no downside to being on the smaller end.
No.
Like a smaller jump versus like, whereas if you try to push the bigger end, there can be a lot of hangups with that.
Yeah, people who really rely on load progression too much, they end up like 3 months later, it's like that's a completely different movement that like what you started with, you know? So
it's all right, they'll grow
like,
into it.
That's my fair. I've never heard that. Like, I'll hit depth on meet day. Like, what?
Oh, you
that
never heard
is,
that? Yeah, it's like
it's, I mean, yeah.
I've never heard that. It was terrifying.
Like I know range of motion was short here, but I'm touching some new weights. So it's like,
next question. How long can I build muscle on maintenance calories? I started 9 months ago. I realize that is vague, but it's going to bring up some concepts that I think could be helpful.
I think like they've been on maintenance for 9 months, or they started training 9 months ago.
Let's assume both. Let's assume I just started training 9 months ago and I haven't changed my calories at all. How long do you think I could carry?
I mean, if you've been training 9 months, they started training 9 months ago, then like visual changes are still going to be occurring on like a month to month basis. And so your bottom line is like staring you in the face every day. It's like you see that you're progressing. And so in that case, I'd say ride it out. But I mean, most people that start training are going to, well, I guess I shouldn't say, it's not fair. I was going to say most people are going to be probably in a surplus, but there's also people that start training around maintenance, that have some body fat to lose, that are going to recomp for a long time. Is it efficiently recomp? So
Now, I know we've talked about this in this podcast has been like for a lot of years now, but at some point, I think like 2 or 3 times we've said, or someone has said on this podcast, that like we almost tend to wish that if you're just starting lifting and you've been like not giving a shit about your food, continue to not give a shit about your food, because just the act of starting a lifting program will make you hungrier in proportion to like what you need most of the time.
Yeah.
And so I think monitoring your calories unnecessarily, like this happens to kids and athletes in every other sport all the time, is like you just give them more shit to do and they just eat when they're hungry.
Yeah.
And they grow. And so
I know that was kind of the approach I took. Like I didn't have any dietary direction, like in terms of calories when I started. Like, here's your training program. Now here, like, increase your protein intake to, try to eat more protein. So it was just like, that was like the only concerted effort I made on the dietary side. But then appetite naturally kind of came up just because of the nature of the training. So
then how long did that last in accordance to this question? Like what was like years, months?
A couple years at least, I'd say, for me.
That's awesome.
But I mean, I didn't track calories till probably like 7 years into my lifting, So it was, I mean, I never tracked macros. It's like I would track protein, and I would track like the cleanness of my sources. So it's like, okay, it doesn't matter. As long as I'm eating brown rice and getting enough protein, like it doesn't matter. Which surprisingly, those were like probably stretches where I didn't make as much progress because I was like overly analytical and stuffing myself with food that just tasted like crap, So, yeah, I think it's a hard question to answer directly. But like if your performance is going up over time, like even if you're an advanced lifter and you're eating at maintenance and your performance is trending up, month to month, there's going to be volatility in that. But if you see like an upward trend, like chances are you are putting on some muscle. And so I kind of use that as the proxy when rapid visual changes aren't available like they are with a beginner.
Mm-hmm. So am I getting stronger without either losing or gaining weight more than I'm coming?
Yeah, like if I'm eating at maintenance and I'm not really changing, body weight's not moving and I'm getting stronger, you probably are heading in the right direction in terms of muscle growth. It might not be the most efficient way to gain muscle. It probably isn't at that stage, but like if it's important for somebody to like stay in a small narrow window in terms of body comp, then I think that's okay.
Man, they didn't give us much, right? And then there's so many routes to the answer with this person's specific question. So
it's good they learn all the thinking routes.
Yeah, cover as many of them as we can, right? So yeah, like recomping, true recomping is like losing fat, gaining muscle, right? But at maintenance or around maintenance, we'll say, it's the same old rules, right? It's like, hey, are you a newbie? That'll happen. Did you just like start enhancements, like the ones we don't work with, sort of enhancements? That'll happen. If you're someone coming off a layoff who was, had some training experience prior, that will happen. Also, another one is like if people are doing a lot of things wrong, like that'll happen. Like you get someone with like complete dog shit technique and like lifestyle, and you fix a lot of those things, they will recomp. They're finally leg pressing to a a good depth, and they're no longer have their hands on their knees, and their bros aren't spotting them for like the half of the reps, right? So if you're doing a lot of things wrong, that's another one. In this case, it sounds like what he's saying is or whoever it was, that they started at maintenance and they've been doing this for 9 months. I imagine they were new, and so far they've been doing this for 9 months. I kind of like the idea of starting this way, so long as the person isn't at a unhealthy body weight, just because it gives them more bandwidth to really focus on what's going to impact their training the most, right? Like Eric has said before, that nutrition is permissive to training. So if they went on 3 macros that were, a slight surplus but didn't train, nothing would happen. They just get fat slowly. But if they trained and really got all their ducks in order when it comes to that, and their nutrition was for the most part the same, maybe you could include more protein. Certainly if this person's sending us questions, they probably do that. Some fruits, some vegetables, just overall, just focusing on some of the health aspects of nutrition here, not just like what is it going to nail me from a cosmetic standpoint. Like, that's all we really need. Like, that's the one thing. And I say this because my girlfriend Cynthia just started personal training, and one thing I told her is like, man, it's like low-hanging fruit with these personal trainers. Like, these people don't need a whole lot of complexity when it comes to their like nutrient life. Like, honestly, if you told them to have a protein shake in the morning or some sort of protein, and then some sort of protein after they train, and they focus on their training, they will literally transform their body like over the course of a year. Like, that's how powerful strength training is. So in this case, your body will kind of tell you when you're done. Like, I think I didn't get the idea of bulking until I surrounded myself with bodybuilders. When I bodybuilding message board forums, when I really wanted to get into this. Prior to that, I was just kind of floating around the same weight and just started to look better. And very quickly, like, I experimented with like, all right, let's try to eat a little bit more. And almost overnight, you will feel like something is missing. Like, your training will supercharge, especially when you are newer to training. So, nothing wrong with writing it as it is, especially if you're making good progress. And it's been a simple addition to your life, this just training and eating and maintenance, not or trying to be weight stable. I'd say run that thing as long as you can, and then eventually like add layers of complexity. And that's the best way to do it, because like Brian, I didn't start counting calories till around the same time. Like, prior to that, it was just like some form of, I don't know, orthorexia that I kind of enjoyed, and then eventually it's like, you start adding like, like for me, it went from just training to like, I should have a protein bar after I train, to eventually it's like, hey, let me get some tuna into my diet. To eventually like, 1 gram per pound. All right, let's do that. Oh, carbs are important. Let me have a little bit of carbs like pre-training. And I think that's the best way to do it, because slowly you make your bodybuilding life a little bit more complicated, and by the time it's time to add another step, you've already kind of mastered whatever you were working on before. Like, maybe in this person's case, it's like, hey, for the first time ever in 9 months, they've been consistent with their training. So it's like, hey, cool, master that domain, and then just add things as you go. Because again, no rush. This is one of those sports where it's like, bro, you probably, like, even if maybe they don't feel that way, because everyone feels like they started too late, like, you have decades of progress ahead of you.
And it sucks because, like, I mean, I think everything's like this, but what sucks is when you're new, like, just that transition from newbie gains to like average gains, you think shit's going wrong, when it's like, no, you just got better. But it's like, you just got good enough for things to matter, and then you think all this shit went wrong when it's like the opposite.
Yeah.
Or something. 4 questions left. Number 7, if I'm fatigued badly after a decent leg day, which is a day or 2 of fatigue, will it be better to split it up during the week into smaller sessions? Similar to what we talked about earlier, but this is like, rather than being like, should I wait a day, which is where the first person's brain went, this one's saying like, should I break that volume into 2 days?
I mean, I guess the fatigue aspect, kind of like the recovery question in that previous question. It's like, what do you mean by fatigued? Like, do you feel like you got hit by a truck? Do you feel like, okay, I'm like, if I had to run, I couldn't run as fast as I normally could, you know, or just some light stiffness, you know, like there's a lot of different ways to define fatigue under that kind of broad umbrella. But I mean, I know I'm fatigued after, you know, for a day or two after a hard leg day. I think most people probably are. I think it just kind of matters the severity of it. And I think I would look more like, rather than the fatigue, maybe look at the volume within that session to begin with. You know, if you're doing 15 sets of legs, then, you know, or of quads or something, then yeah, I think it would be worth probably considering splitting that up. But if you're doing like a reasonable amount, like just to throw out a range, like 6 to 10 sets, or maybe 6 to 8 sets for a body part, and you feel a little bit of fatigue, like I think that's probably reasonable and kind of expected. And if you're doing 15 sets and you feel just mildly fatigued, then maybe the training is like, it's possible the training isn't that intense, because I would imagine like 15 hard sets of a movement would, like, that would wreck me for like 6 days, you know? So, but I sort of look at, like, when it comes to like adding frequency in terms of a body part, I kind of use, I look at volume. Well, I look at recovery too, and like performance, but you know, how are those later sessions in the or later exercises in the training session, like, am I executing those with intent, or am I like, I got to get through these to check them off so I can be done for the day? And if they're kind of going, if I'm going through the motions on something, then I usually add an additional day of work. But yeah, it's kind of a vague question, but I mean, I think it's a good question. I just think there's a lot of possibilities that, you know, that the answer depends on.
Yeah, and I know in other podcasts or courses we have in Evolve, we've mentioned the unnecessary, like, mental marrying to even having a leg day, when it's like, what if you could do 2 of those sets on your arm day that's 3 days before or some shit? I don't know. Like, your leg extensions go on the arm day, and then I don't know. But it's not like, do I leave it or split it? Like you said, there's a lot of other options. It's not like just either or.
I think a good rule of thumb for most people's volume needs is split it up like into 2 sessions over the course of the week. Like you said, if there's a leg day, usually I'm like, do you have legs that are very like hyper responding to training? In that case, it's like, okay, maybe that's all they need, because they need to bring up all these other things. But typically, like, that's a good way to not look for trouble, is like, whatever you feel you need to do for the work, collection of work for all your body parts that you've assigned to yourself, split that over 2 days. One thing Brian said is that, yeah, like, this is a good way to decide if you're doing too much. By the time you get to, typically, I like it so that maybe there's 1 or 2 final movements that you do have to kind of power through. And they're usually smaller movements. And if it exceeds that, we might be doing too much for the day. So, yeah. And
if it's every time, also, I think it's common for people to feel like when something happens once, something needs to change. But it's like, does it happen every week?
That's a good point.
Is it every week, or is it like, because you did something this weekend and you didn't really have the rest days you usually had, and like, whatever. But,
and Berto brought up a good point with, like, if I think more often than not, it's like training a body part twice a week is probably has more upside than downsides in most cases. So, and maybe I guess when I read this, in the back of my mind, I just sort of assumed it was multiple times a week, but maybe not. If that's just like one leg day, like one giant leg day, then I would definitely consider the possibility of splitting it up.
if you have to hype yourself up every week too, I remember I've had programs like that in the past where it's like, this is the day you're going to spend 3 hours.
That's a sign.
You better eat a lot. And it's like, Why are we doing that?
It's like even worse than like what I mentioned when you get yourself in that predicament where constantly the last like more than one or two things you're having to let's go. If you're doing that before your session, then yeah, there's it's messed up.
Yeah. I know I started with because I started lifting with guys in grad school, and it was like Monday is this day, Tuesday is this day, and it was like, oh shit, it's leg day. So like you better go to bed early and you better eat all this shit and then just shaking the rest of the day like an idiot.
Yeah.
Whatever. Question number 8, thoughts on doing mini bulk and mini cut cycles as an intermediate rather than Maingaining? I feel like I'm more consistent with mini cycles such as like a 5 to 6 week bulk followed by a 2 to 3 week cut. I've heard Maingaining.
You've what?
I have too.
Maingaining, but I like it.
Oh, I have.
Did Greg? Did you or was it Greg Doucette that popularized
I said
that?
gaintaining.
That one. I know that one. I know gaintaining.
I said gaintaining.
Maingaining.
Maingaining, I think, is a new one for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I haven't
And there's
heard that.
only one context where obviously we went over like the maintenance, like when that would be okay.
So just means eating at maintenance while gaining muscle, like the unicorn phase is what we're okay.
Yeah. But I think since he said intermediate, I think he sees the Maingaining as a viable but slower option.
Mm-hmm. Not a dirty bulk, which is the...
You have to be pretty precise for that. Could you imagine like maintaining semi-weight maintenance is like a 2-ish% window up or down? Like it's not weighing the same thing every day. Like let's just get that straight. Because even your most weight stable friend, like that guy that's been skinny for like 20 years, like if you weight him throughout the year, like it fluctuates. He just doesn't know. But I feel that you can get a large portion of your gains that way. It's just going to take a very long time. It's more tedious than it sounds, I think, as well. And I think for some people, you might, when you already have, 85, 90% of your muscle, like that extra 15, 10% on top of that 85, 90, that's a big freaking deal.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to look very different. So yeah, Maingaining, I don't think it's a viable option. I think it's going to drive you more insane than anything else. But I guess if you want to go down that route, that's fine. And I guess the same thing with it sounds like when I read this, it's like it's one of those folks that wants to stay at a very specific like body fat level, like, and they're trying to do it through the Maingaining or through very small cuts, small gaining phases and small cuts. I think that's what's going on here. I think that's why they want to know if it's a good approach, because it fits that profile, that person that wants to be, maybe nothing too crazy, but like probably no leaner than 12%, no higher than like 14%. Emergency pool party, they are there. Like that's what we want. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think he kind of answered his own question too, or he or she, whoever asked this, but I feel like I'm more consistent with cycles, like mini cycles, 5 to 6 week bulk followed by a 2 to 3 week cut. I mean, if you're more consistent with it, like that's usually the better option kind of regardless. If you would have said like I'm more consistent Maingaining, which I think is probably the case for myself. Like I don't like having like the planned, like, okay, now I'm bulking, now I'm cutting. And part of that's probably just been as I've gotten a little bit older, but I also think that like someone's level of body fat impacts this too. Like if you're already very lean, like Maingaining, like let's say you're below, we use the term like set point. Like let's say you're pretty lean, 6-pack, whatever. That's going to be a much less efficient process than it would be like if you're 20% over like your stage weight, or 15 to 20% body fat. So I think that's something to consider too. But I think you can still make good progress maintaining weight even or I guess noticeable progress maintaining weight, even as an advanced athlete, personally, if you're not shredded, you know.
So thoughts on it, if we're trying to maintain body weight at a steady calorie level, or 5 or 6 up, 2 to 3 week down, it sounds like it doesn't really matter too much for the outcome.
So I guess
think,
here's another one. Like what Brian said that you can recomp. I gave the other list, and here's, I guess, one more we can add. It's like, if you have more body fat than your body would kind of like, that's also an environment where, even if at this point you've gotten to the place where the adaptations that you want, they're a little bit more stubborn, right? Like, it's like at that point, like, even with like food that's coming in, exogenous food, fuel, like, that's tricky enough as it is sometimes. Like, you know, it's not as predictable as we would want once we get beyond a certain point of development. It's slow. But I can, and I have seen it with certain people where it's like, hey, if you get your body fat levels like up over 20% and you have your training like pretty on lock, your body can probably pull from what's stored there, but it's because your body is at a body fat level that it feels like beyond safe fat. Like, I know that I can induce a recomp sort of effect if I am over 190 pounds. Like, at that point, fine. But usually those are not the people who are asking this question. They're asking this question because they want to look, they want to go to the festivals looking good and things like that. Brian, I think his festival days are over.
Yeah, no glow sticks for me.
Not currently. So it's more like, it might not matter so much for the result, but maybe more for like, do you need a 2 or 3 week break from whatever you're doing? Right? Like, if you're trying to coast at this like kind of lean person, I don't know, if it does you psychological good to take a break from living in a semi-diet all the time, and vice versa, if you're like trying to push calories to where it makes you miserable all the time, would it be okay to like relax for a couple weeks every once in a while and then get back on your road?
Yeah. I think it kind of naturally works out that way for a lot of people anyway. It's like you have stretches where
We went on vacation.
we went on vacation. It's like I was in a bigger surplus, or you overeat one day and the next day maybe you're not that hungry, you know? And so things just naturally ebb and flow like that. But I think for this person, they're doing what they should be doing, you know, especially if they're an intermediate. From an efficiency perspective, it's probably better to have dedicated surpluses. And from a consistency perspective, they already addressed that. Like, they feel better about doing it that way. So I would say keep doing it.
Good point. Yeah, I feel like I'm more consistent that way than if you are. Great. So that's just like a personal preference. If like mathematically the calories and the body weight are going to end up the same at the end of 6 months, and it's just like whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
What can be the bottleneck eventually, though, is that they, you know, as they progress, like, you might need more than 5 to 6 weeks to really see if what you're doing is working. But that's something he can fix later.
Yeah, that is the one thing. It seemed like the ratio was a little bit light on the gaining side. But then again, it depends on how assertive they're being. But
sure. What's your favorite, like, say you have someone who wants to be a competitor or is a competitor every other year or some shit. So like they take this very seriously. What is your favorite amount of time to keep someone in a surplus without, like, if someone's like, I don't want to get fat, but like I want to do like a good gain to make a difference in a couple years when I get back to stage. Do y'all like doing like 6 months, a year before a mini cut? Or do you like to see like, all right, you got 2 years, we're going to eat for 2 years straight?
I like 3-1, 4-1, 5-1, somewhere around there. And how long the gaining phase is going to be dependent on how much time they need for us to figure out if like this is a good strategy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also think like if people like gaining at 0.5 to 1.5% per month, like that's almost harder for people to stay within those parameters than it is to diet, you know, like that's a very like conservative surplus, you know, it's a couple hundred extra calories. So I think that's like, if someone's actually sticking to that, I mean, a gaining phase, let's say like post show or something, like, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume like, okay, let's go a year into the next year before we have to like, and like once we reach like kind of the top end in terms of body comp, like, okay, now let's peel back so we get some more runway for gaining again. But I think the rate, I think people tend to cut more regularly because they just naturally gain probably slightly faster than they need to.
Yeah. 2 more questions. I'm going to try to hurry. We're so much longer than usual. Not really. We're like 10 minutes over usual. Question number 9. Please, could you advise on boosting grip strength? It seems to always be a problem with my deadlifts.
So yeah, I mean, I think grip strength is obviously important with powerlifting. And, I think probably the easiest way that I've found to kind of add like grip training for powerlifters or anybody who's, lifting without straps that needs to prioritize that is like, if they're doing, say they're doing an RDL, or maybe after they finish their deadlifts, I'll do like just static holds. And usually I'll start with something they can like hold for like 20 to 30 seconds, just with like a double overhand grip. And you could do like a hook grip if you wanted to just kind of get comfortable with that. But, and then basically I'll increase weight every week. So let's say they start at, 100 kilos. I might say like, okay, do two sets until like, rather than RIR, like till you're like 1 to 2 seconds away from dropping the weight, and then set it down and then rest, do another like set, and then, be done. And then the next week, maybe add, 2.5, 5 kilos and do it again. And so naturally the time starts to come down, but that kind of goes back to the question about like load, like should you, the load jumps. I think in this case, it's like prioritizing load progression over like duration, like extending the set is a good thing, because we don't need to hold a deadlift for 30 seconds, but we need to progressively get stronger in like the peak force that we can, exert. So I think more routine load increases, like even weekly load increases, and then just allow the time to kind of come down and do like 2 to 3 sets of that, once or twice a week, I think it seems to work pretty well in my experience. But
are they pulling from like hip height or like a couple inches before?
Usually, if I have RDLs in someone's program, I'll usually program them after that, and then they'll just like lift it off the J cups and hold it, and then set it back down. Just because it's convenient. But if there's, if they have to load a barbell in a rack, like that's fine after deads, or they can do, a deadlift and then just hold it at the top, or something like that. But I don't usually, and then obviously like I think straps get kind of a bad rap in power. I think they can be abused, but I also think they get a bad rap. Like if your grip is a limiting factor in creating like an overload stimulus, it's like, oh, I had 2 more reps, but my grip gave out. Then in that case, it's like use straps to achieve like the muscular stimulus that we're after, and then maybe do the static holds after that. Like there's a lot of ways to train your grip, but there's not a lot of ways to train the musculature within a movement without actually doing the movement, so, but yeah, I mean, I've been guilty of that in the past too. It's like I will use straps probably more than I should, to be honest, but I think when I last competed, it's like I was doing some grip work on the side, so it wasn't an issue. But there's also something to be said, like if you're a competitor, like lifting with straps is going to feel different than lifting like hook grip or, mixed grip, like where the bar is in your hands can feel different. If you're pulling the hook grip, like that's a pretty demanding thing to start, like it's an uncomfortable grip when you start with it. So, almost like exposing yourself to durations of that with those static holds can be nice too, because you can kind of desensitize yourself to the discomfort a bit.
Well, I didn't think about like what you said that if it's a problem at the end of their workout, well, it's like, well, but in a meet, you only have to do so many. Like if your grip strength isn't a problem till the end of your workout, but like you're fine for the first half of every workout, then you're probably fine at a meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of what Brian said, working around what you will be doing for like your best case deadlift, your third, and like just holding that weight for periods that are relevant to what you're trying to do. Because I guess there's two kinds of grip strength. There's like crushing grip, and then there's like endurance grip, right? Like the crushing is like, what is it? Like, what do they call, Brian? Like Captain
of
COC.
Crush, I think I have one. I have one that's like if you close it, you get like a certificate, and I bought it, and I've
It's
never
just
closed
somewhere.
it.
But that's a crushing grip, and then you have an endurance grip, which is more like what rock climbers do, and like powerlifting is kind of like in between. So like Brian said, it's like, hey, something relevant to like what you're doing, some holds like in that top position, because what your wrist angle is at the top of the deadlift versus like the floor, it's the same thing. Well, it should be anyways, right? So you can just do, it's like the one time that it might be excusable to like rack pull, but not really rack pull. But one thing to mention is that like a lot of things, like, you know, people will ask a random question via DM. It's like, hey, my squat has been stuck at, I don't know. And it's like, well, I need to see it. So there are a lot of videos and resources out there. There might be something technically off about your grip. So I know either when it comes to hook grip, I don't know if it was Candido or Sean Oriega. They made a video on hook grip. Yeah. So sometimes it could just be a technique thing. Like I have some pretty small paws, but I got the hang of the technical aspect of hook grip, and like that thing is pretty stuck. I mean, it doesn't feel great, but it works. So yeah, might be something there. It might just be something wrong with your technique. I guess while I'm here, for the bodybuilders, like, use straps, dude. Like, especially for a lot of the work that we do, it's just use straps. Like it's insane how much that makes a difference, especially on like your back movements, where it really is like an endurance sort of hold. So but yeah, you know what? With this is a problem that's quite curable. Like, I've seen a lot of people who, they had popcorn hands, and then eventually, like, it became a non-issue.
Okay, last one. What are 3 to 5 things you've learned or changed your mind on when it comes to bodybuilding, lifting, or nutrition in the past 6 months?
That's the part I don't like. 6 months. I think they might have meant like, 6 years, I think.
We can answer what we'd rather answer if you want to. If there's nothing in 6 months.
There might be a couple things.
Okay.
But it can be like 6 years, because 6 years, like, a lot should change, right?
True.
I think they want to know something that kind of expresses the rate at which we might still be learning, given what we know, right? Okay. Because, I mean, when we started every 6 months, you should be learning something new. Yeah. You know, but eventually it's like, can you? I think it doesn't have to be 6 months. Let's say a year. I think a calendar year is...
So is there nothing in 6 months that you've really been like, and so I started doing this? You can say no, but it's just like...
There probably is. I'm just trying to, off the top of my head, I need time to think about it a little bit more.
No time. We're running out of time.
And some of that's by
And also he says 3 to 5 things. Like, there...
I know.
Maybe that is,
3 to 5 in 6 months.
After so many years of y'all doing this, that is a little bit, that would probably indicate something probably.
We're messing up a lot. Yeah. There's a problem.
Yeah, you don't want.
No, I love the premise of the question, though. Things that change your mind on.
Broaden it now. Okay.
Year.
3 to 5 things in 6 months would be a novice situation, which y'all are not. So we can express that.
You know, one thing, and I think maybe we can both speak to this, and I guess it's technically maybe a little bit over a year, but, you know, Bert, in your last off season, like, you start doing more like lengthened biased like back work, and I think that's sort of a hot topic right now, like training at longer muscle lengths, and
we just had a podcast on it.
So I think there's like with back work traditionally, like, say, like a regular wide grip lat pull down, like you're never really getting a great stretch in your lats. Your hands are fixed to the bar. The resistance profile itself is not like it's easiest in the lengthened position. So yeah, doing things, and by nature, like most pulling movements, unless you have like one of those Prime or Strive machines, like any free weight movement or cable movement is usually going to be easier in the lengthened positions relative to like more shortened positions for pulling. It's like the opposite of bench press, basically. So I think spending like the solution there is like, okay, let's at least explore more lengthened positions through our setup. And so doing things, shout out to Cass, like doing things like pull arounds or something where you're kind of pulling slightly across your body, getting a better stretch through your lat. I mean, I think it's helped me in the past like year and a half, 2 years. And some of that, like anytime you try a new technique and you're excited about it, it's like you approach it with a little bit more intent, which I think can't be overlooked either. But I do think, with the, growing body of research that, shows that there, is often a benefit of kind of prioritizing or at least getting into those end ranges. I think it's changed the way I approach like lat and back training specifically.
Year and a half, one thing. That's good. That's good. It's better than 3 to 5 and 6 months. No, that's good. You got anything, Bert?
Well, similar to him. And it kind of brings up a few things. Like there's a lot of things that bros do that might be correct. And I made this example on the Revive podcast where if you take a bro that's like really invested in this, like really is, and let's call him an in the trenches scientist just to give this person a little bit more respect, right? Like someone who really comes to mind here is someone like John Meadows, who before like he started to get a lot more assistance from like, hey, these science geeks over here. Like a lot of it was just kind of exploring and playing with things. And I think they're beneficial people to learn from because okay, they are really invested. It's not about ego or they've really learned to minimize that. It's really about figuring things out and making themselves better. And let's just assume that they're pretty high responders and let's assume that they're enhanced. So for them, when they try something new, very quickly they can see, is this sending me in the right direction or not? So sometimes people like John, like Dante Trudell, like, it's like, those are the people I think about when I'm like, oh, these are those analytical, like gym scientists. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes they're ahead of the curve or they have things to say that are worth listening to. And like when I think of a lot of people with amazing backs, like for example, and like my back actually was when I was an amateur, one of my best body parts. And then eventually I hurt myself. So I was like, all right, let me not be jerky with my rows. But what I was doing it was the hard way of doing it. I was literally opening a can with my teeth. Instead of using a can opener, this is what we're doing now with like these lengthened positions, is I was doing cheaty rows, but the cheaty rows were really challenging those lengthened positions, basically. Same thing with my presses. Like I would bro press a lot where I would stay here because I felt like I could get more work if I just kind of hovered it in this area, especially with the bench press. And I knew that if I locked out everything, the amount of fatigue would be like, you can't get as many reps, you can't do as much work.
And you get elbow shit too, right?
Yeah, for some people. But usually, yeah, you fatigue from like shortened to lengthened. Like that's how that goes. So yeah, like, so now I'm like constantly, well, I have been for the last few years. It's like, all right, let me hear what you have to say. Because I think it was John Meadows' presentation. When I got to present with him, this was like in 2017, I was like, because of the people that were associated with John that would like echo his stuff, and in hindsight, it's like, we're misquoted all the time. Like usually the messengers, like the things they're saying, like it's happened to us. So I'm like, that's not what I meant, bro. You completely like ran away with this. So, when the whole mountain dog craze was going around, I'm like, I don't know about this guy. Right. And then I got to hear him present. I'm like, this dude is like brilliant. And he really thought this stuff like all the way through. It's like, it made me want to implement some of the things that he was promoting. So yeah. And so I agree with Brian. And then I guess one thing I can connect that to is that and this is more so as a, I guess as an educator, it's like, it's very important for me. I don't know if I'll ever get a home gym. I don't think so. Or maybe I'll have something, but I also need to be like right there and in the trenches, because it puts you in close proximity to the culture. And I think that's very important if you want to help people. You need to see what these people need. So that's the one thing I go to the gym and people watch. They probably think I'm freaking weird, but I'm just like there, just observing everything. And I'm trying to, scare the ladies. So I could, I'm not going to go there. But so I could end up on TikTok. But yeah. It's so that's one thing I've realized, is that I need to stay in close proximity to like what's going around there, because that's going to allow me to do my job better. Whereas like in the past, I used to like a gym culture is like, damn it. It's like just me having to wait on equipment that I want to use. So now it's beneficial. And it just proves a point that like, same thing with like, John and Dante's, like you truly can learn from anybody. Like it might be in different ways, but like anyone can teach you something.
So you're saying you've like learned to, like, it's making you a better coach and athlete to observe and think about the things you see out in the wild.
Yeah, it's like, where are these people at?
What's a common problem? Maybe maybe my athletes do this and I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how can I be more relatable to these people? Because that's very important as an educator. So that's one. That's kind of like 1.5. Because I will say, learning from like the gym culture versus learning from like Dante or John, very different things, right?
But I do like that you're saying that's online, because like we're online coaches, so like a lot of our athletes learn online. So we've always stressed like the importance of working in a gym. Like a lot of us, or almost all of us, were personal trainers at some point too.
Yeah, and we're not dog trainers. Like dog culture is pretty much like been the same forever. We train people, right? And an important component of people is culture. Where is the culture at? So,
and you think that's a change? Like you used to think that wasn't as valuable as you do now. Or you just didn't think about it before, and now you do.
I guess I always kind of I've seen it as important, but I think as you become older, it's it's just easy to stay in your own little shell, to just stay put. This is how I want my things to be from now on. This is the environment I feel comfortable in. And yeah, I'm no different in that respect, but at the same time, like I need to get in there and see what's going on so that I can do my job better.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you take like some of the guys like John and Dante, and you see them sort of trial something and stick with it, it's like, if they're genetically, respond well, if they're on additional supplements, that sort of accelerates the timeline of like a study duration, like some of these studies that we see, it's like, okay, these are, assume to be, natural individuals over like a 8 to 12 week period. Like sometimes it's hard to like the statistical significance of some of these interventions, it can be hard to see, but yeah, you take somebody who's on anabolics, it kind of speeds it up a bit. That's a good point. So, but no, I agree. And I wish I could train I have a home gym. But I get that same feeling when I go to the gym. Like it's good to sort of see what people are doing. And one thing, I still go, try to go once a week or so out of the house, but, there has been a shift. Like I feel like the evidence-based direction of, resistance training, it's starting to bleed over into that demographic that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise, like a decade ago, thought that it would. Like you see people doing some movements, or, you hear people talking about, calories and macros rather than, chicken and rice and things like that. So everything's sort of raising a bit in terms of knowledge, and you do see it start to carry over. So I think that's a valuable reminder too, because I think there's still often, missing pieces there that people are open to, refining their approach to things. But they, maybe they're not quite all the way, like 100%, or they're 50% of the way there. And, seeing how they train and maybe ways that you can help that demographic too. But then, I don't go to the gym, but I have Instagram, so I still see plenty of that. So, but yeah, it's always fun, like, to go to pages of people that are, fitness, influencers, or somebody who's sort of outside our space a bit in how they're training. And also seeing, like, a lot of them are still getting really good results, and some of them are genetically very gifted. But I think one thing I've really realized maybe over the past, like, 5 years or so is, like, a lot of this shit works, and keeping people in the game long enough to reach their potential is kind of the big priority here. And, whether that be sustainability in terms of behaviors, sustainability in terms of, like, injury prevention. But yeah, if you can keep people excited about training for a long period of time, like, good things are going to happen, kind of not regardless of what they're doing, but, like, you can have a program that's far from optimal on paper that produces pretty good results.
Yeah, great point.
Could you imagine me and Brian in today's gym culture? If we're like, I don't know, like 18, 19. We'd actually younger, because I think it's hilarious. I didn't know this, but, like, dudes that they're getting their hair permed.
Yeah, the broccoli head.
You would have definitely done that.
I thought they were naturally curly. Like, I was like, wow. Like,
has there been alteration in the gene pool?
Yeah, everyone's like Patrick Mahomes all of a sudden, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, shoot. Like, what I have told my mom is, like, what like, hey mom, can you drive me to go get a perm? Like, shoot, I don't know what she would have thought about that. But again, we were wearing our pants, like, down by our hamstrings.
Yeah.
So
y'all had, like, the frosted tips. That was a thing. Everyone was. No, that's after you. That's me in high school.
yeah, that's the laughter. Yeah.
I didn't have that.
Let's see. But I was gonna go some. Oh yeah. So I guess the perks in social media. I think one thing that I'd like to see people do more, and it'd be normalized more, is don't just record your work for the sake of like social media, but do it for yourself. Like, I tell my athletes all the time, it's like, I feel kind of nude if for some reason I can't record myself. So I wish it'd be more normalized, because, and I'm just like, fortunately, I train at a gym where it's, like, very, like, it's almost encouraged to record yourself, right? But one of my athletes had an issue the other day with it, and, like, someone gave her grief about that, and I was like, man, like, I would have made that a teaching moment where, like, I record myself because I really do feel that if people knew better, they would do better, and, like, I'm trying to get my technique to be exactly how I want. So it's like, hey, we use them for selfies and all that stuff. It's like, I wish we would, like, it'd be more like, I think powerlifting does that. Like, it's part of your setup. It's like, you have your tripod because, you want to catch things and correct them, like, throughout the session. Not, like, keep doing the same thing for many weeks, and then before you know it, because you're one of those people who, like, overly relies on load progression, you're doing a completely different movement. You didn't even realize it, right? But that, and then I guess kind of was speaking on gym culture, is kind of what this turned into. I like the fact that we have a, like, selfie room. It's supposed to be a posing room, but it's a selfie room. I guess what it turned out, like, very few people who compete are actually there practicing their posing. But there's all these, like, people there taking selfies, and I think to an outsider that looks almost like a little vain, right? But to me, it's like, this is great. Like, these are people who are, like, they're celebrating, like, their hard work. They're proud of their bodies. Like, not a whole lot of people can say that. So yeah, I wish, something that you should consider if you own a gym is, like, hey, have a selfie room, have a full length mirror somewhere with good lighting. Cause, I think it can become unhealthy, but it's not a bad thing. Like, we never look at it from that perspective. So there's perks to these.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, y'all started lifting way before I did, but, like, it's very lonely at first. Like, you felt stupid for caring so much about something that everyone thought was just, like, vanity. So I do think One of my favorite parts about the internet is that there's other people out there that care as much about the shit that you're embarrassed to care about. And like, that's nice.
Yeah. Yep. What another thing I wanted to touch upon was I do think that even maybe not when you're really messed up when you're prepping, but if you organize your nutrition and your training over the course of the microcycle and you use refeeds the way we've been trying to get people to do forever, like you can not only minimize in certain regions like how much muscle you lose, but you can put on muscle as well. Because like when you think about it, like muscle maintenance, like what is maintenance? Because that's what we're trying to do when we gain muscle, right? Like there's nothing in your body that just stands still, like a muscle cell, like it's either getting bigger or getting smaller. So the same adaptations or you maintaining muscle over the course of a contest prep just really means that like your muscle cell was kind of like doing this over the course of like the prep, and then at the end it kind of ended in a place that we can call maintenance. Like it stayed roughly the same. So if it's growing sometimes, shrinking sometimes, because that's what it does when you're eating like in the surplus, it's doing the same thing, but it's trending in this direction. If you organize your calories and you sprinkle them in the right way over the right times of the week, it makes sense. It's like you can grow muscle in those areas that, you know, you need to grow muscle in. Like for me, it was a combination of, for the first time ever, really focusing on like the lengthening of like my medial delts. And I just happened to have my shoulder and arm day, like right in the middle of like this 3-day refeed. Like I know for sure, like regional growth in my medial delts over the course of a contest prep. They ended up better than how they started. So you can grow muscle over the course of a deficit or a fat loss phase. Even a contest prep, obviously you just have to pick your spots. That's all.
You've been doing it with your athletes too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's 3 to 5 things, Joel.
Yeah, Alberto carried the load on that one.
It's a team effort, a team podcast.
Those were good.
Okay. Anything else? At all? That question or otherwise? Because we have finished our 10 questions.
Yeah, they should put broccoli hair on me and Brian like for this.
There's no reason you can't get a perm now. I just want to say that. Thank you guys so much for all of your time, all of your knowledge, all of your question answering. Thank you, listeners, for asking your questions.
Yeah.
And for listening to us talk for 230 episodes.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Signing off. Bye.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Helms here, Chief Science Officer of 3DMJ. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And let me just take 1 second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I do with Lauren Colenso-Semple, Eric Trexler, as well as Mike Zerdos. These are experts in their field, and we cover all the information relevant to you as an athlete or coach if you're working with strength or physique athletes, or if you're a recreational or competitive athlete yourself. We cover nutrition, training, sports psychology, and health. And we do this in written format, as well as, since you like the podcast, audio summaries, as well as video concept reviews. If you're a trainer, we also have continuing education credits for ACSM, NSCA, NASM, and ACE. So head over to 3dmusclejourney.com, click on the products tab, and you can find us there. I look forward to seeing you, and enjoy the podcast.